The title Samson, Strength, Betrayal, and Tragic Redemption promises a deep dive into the biblical figure of Samson, exploring three core facets of his narrative. Strength. This part necessitates an examination of the source and nature of Samson's immense physical power. How was it bestowed? What were its limitations and requirements? What symbolic significance did it hold? Betrayal. This points to the pivotal moments where Samson was deceived or turned against, particularly by Delilah. It requires exploring the motives behind these betrayals, their immediate consequences, and their broader implications for Samson's mission and personal life. Tragic redemption. This is the most complex aspect, demanding an analysis of Samson's ultimate sacrifice. How was his death a form of redemption? What made it tragic? What theological lessons can be drawn from this final act, moving beyond simple vengeance to a deeper understanding of God's plan and human failing? Part 1. The opening. Planting the seeds of mystery. In the flickering embrace of candlelight, where shadows dance and ancient scrolls whisper secrets, we embark on a journey into the heart of one of the Bible's most enigmatic and compelling figures. His name echoes through the annals of time. Samson. A man born with a divine purpose, endowed with a strength that defied human understanding, yet plagued by weaknesses that would ultimately prove his undoing. How could such a champion, chosen by God from birth, fall prey to the very human frailties he meant to overcome? And in his spectacular downfall, can we truly find a glimmer of divine redemption, or is his story merely a lament for lost glory and tragic choices? Tonight, we peel back the layers of myth and marvel, delving into the raw power, the profound betrayals, and the deeply tragic redemption of Samson. Prepare to witness a tale that forces us to confront the intricate tapestry of divine will and human agency, a narrative rich with lessons that resonate even in our modern age. Part 2. The body, the journey of deep discovery. A. The historical and cultural context. A nation in chains. To truly understand Samson, we must first immerse ourselves in the tumultuous era of the Judges, a period in Israelite history marked by a cyclical pattern of disobedience, oppression, repentance, and deliverance. It was a time when everyone did what was right in their own eyes. Judges 21:25, a stark contrast to the unified leadership of Moses or Joshua. The Philistines, a formidable sea people who had settled on the coastal plains of Canaan, had become the dominant power, oppressing Israel for 40 years. This was not merely political subjugation, it was a spiritual crisis. The Israelites had strayed from their covenant with God, indulging in the idolatrous practices of their neighbors. It is into this crucible of desperation and divine judgment that Samson is born, a promised deliverer, a Nazirite consecrated to God from his mother's womb, Judges 13:5. His very existence was a sign of God's enduring faithfulness, a beacon of hope in a land steeped in despair. His mission was clear: to begin the deliverance of Israel from the hand of the Philistines. But how would a man, whose life was set apart, navigate a world defined by its compromises and moral ambiguities? B. Decoding the Scripture. The anatomy of Samson's strength. The narrative of Samson unfolds primarily in Judges chapters 13 through 16, a dramatic saga penned with vivid detail. His strength, we learn, was not innate muscularity, but a supernatural empowerment, intrinsically linked to his Nazirite vow. This vow, outlined in Numbers 6, prohibited cutting his hair, consuming grape products, and touching dead bodies. The text is explicit. The Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon him. Judges 14:6, 14:19, 15:14. It was this divine enabling, this infusion of God's own might, that allowed him to tear a lion apart with his bare hands, to kill 30 Philistines for their garments, and to slaughter 1,000 more with the jawbone of a donkey. These acts are not merely feats of brute force. They are divine interventions, symbolic declarations of God's power breaking through human limitations. The hair, therefore, was not the source of his strength, but the sign of his covenant, the visible manifestation of his consecrated status. To violate the vow was to break faith with God, thereby severing the conduit for divine power. Yet, Samson's story is not just about physical prowess. It's a poignant exploration of how one man, gifted with such extraordinary ability, repeatedly chose personal desire over divine directive. His strength, though miraculous, was often wielded for personal vengeance or impulsive gratification rather than a sustained, strategic liberation of his people. Is it possible for a divine gift to be misused, even by the chosen? C. The hidden theological meaning, the paradox of power and purity. Samson's narrative unveils a profound theological paradox, the coexistence of immense divine power with startling human weakness. God chose Samson, consecrated him, and empowered him, despite foreseeing his flaws. Perhaps Samson serves as a stark metaphor for Israel itself. Chosen by God, set apart, yet repeatedly drawn away by the allure of foreign customs and forbidden relationships. His struggles with temptation, particularly his fatal attraction to Philistine women, mirror Israel's spiritual adultery. Delilah, the ultimate instrument of his downfall, represents the seductive danger of compromising one's consecrated identity for fleeting pleasure. Samson's story reminds us that divine election does not negate free will, nor does it guarantee moral purity. God's power works through imperfect vessels, but the effectiveness of that power is often contingent upon the vessel's faithfulness. The theological depth lies in understanding that even when Samson strayed, even when he seemed to squander his divine mandate, God's ultimate purpose was still being worked out. His strength, though misused, still served to harass and weaken the Philistines, setting the stage for future deliverance. Is God's plan ever truly derailed by human failing, or does it merely incorporate our mistakes into a grander, more complex design? D. Controversies and theories. A judge or a flawed hero? Samson's character has long been a source of debate among scholars and theologians. Was he a true hero of faith, listed among the faithful in Hebrews 11, despite his glaring moral deficiencies? Or was he a tragic anti-hero, a warning against the dangers of unchecked appetite and spiritual complacency? Some argue that Samson embodied a raw, almost primitive form of justice, acting as a one-man army against the oppressors. His actions, though often violent and personal, nonetheless chipped away at Philistine dominance. Others highlight his spiritual immaturity, his lack of true leadership, and his repeated disregard for his Nazirite vows, a stark contrast to other judges like Gideon or Deborah. His choice of wives and companions, all Philistine, violated Mosaic law and repeatedly led him into compromising situations. Was his spiritual sight as dim as his physical sight eventually became? The story also raises questions about divine sovereignty versus human responsibility. Did God orchestrate Samson's choices, including his ill-advised marriage to a Philistine woman, to fulfill his larger plan of harassing the Philistines, Judges 14-4? Or was Samson's freedom of choice paramount, with God working within the framework of his decisions? These questions invite us to grapple with the complexities of biblical interpretation and the multifaceted nature of divine interaction with human lives. E. The ultimate betrayal, the serpent in the Garden of Strength. The crescendo of Samson's story, and arguably its most poignant element, is the betrayal by Delilah. She was not the first Philistine woman to capture his heart, but she was the one who would ultimately unravel his divine secret. The text of Judges 16 is a masterclass in psychological manipulation. Delilah's relentless questioning, "Tell me the secret of your great strength and how you can be tied up and subdued," Judges 16-6, reveals a cold, calculating pursuit driven by the Philistine lord's promise of silver. Samson, despite his incredible strength, proved incredibly weak against the persistent emotional pressure of a woman he loved. He played a dangerous game, offering false answers, each one escalating the stakes, until, worn down by her daily torment, he finally revealed the truth about his Nazirite vow, and his hair, Judges 16:17. In that moment of vulnerability, his covenant with God was broken. His head was shaved, and his strength left him. Judges 16:19. This was not merely a physical loss. It was a profound spiritual severing. The Philistines then seized him, gouged out his eyes, and put him to work grinding grain in the prison. The mighty champion, the divine deliverer, reduced to a blind, enslaved mockery. What a chilling testament to the devastating power of misplaced trust and the consequence of spiritual compromise. F. Tragic redemption, the final, desperate act. Yet, the story does not end in despair. In the darkness of his captivity, a subtle yet profound transformation begins. But the hair on his head began to grow again after it had been shaved. Judges 16:22. This detail, seemingly innocuous, signals a potential rekindling of his covenant, a silent testament to God's patient grace. The Philistine lords, celebrating their triumph, brought Samson to their temple of Dagon to entertain them. In a moment of profound humility and desperate prayer, Samson cried out to God, "Sovereign Lord, remember me. Please strengthen me just once more, and let me with one blow get revenge on the Philistines for my 2 eyes." Judges 16:28. This prayer, a mixture of personal vengeance and a plea for divine strength, marks his final act of faith. He pushes against the 2 central pillars supporting the temple, and with a final, earth-shattering surge of divinely restored power, the temple collapses, killing Samson and many more Philistines when he died than while he lived. Judges 16:30. Was this truly redemption? It was undoubtedly tragic. Samson died alongside his enemies, his life ending in a violent cataclysm of his own making. Yet, in that final, desperate act, he fulfilled his divine purpose. He struck a devastating blow against the oppressors of Israel, a blow far greater than any he had delivered in his lifetime. His physical death became a spiritual victory, a desperate act of obedience that delivered a significant setback to the Philistine power. He gave his life, not for mere vengeance, but for the beginning of his people's liberation, acknowledging God as the ultimate source of his strength, even in his weakness. His inclusion in the Hall of Faith in Hebrews 11:32-3-4 affirms that, despite his monumental flaws, Samson ultimately acted by faith, trusting in God's power even in the face of death. His redemption is tragic because it cost him everything, a stark reminder that even God's chosen can only find their true purpose in complete surrender. Part 3. The conclusion, eternal resonance. The saga of Samson, from his miraculous birth to his cataclysmic death, is a kaleidoscope of strength, betrayal, and tragic redemption. We have seen how divine power can be bestowed, how human weakness can compromise it, and how even in the depths of failure, God's purposes can be ultimately achieved. Samson's story reminds us that God often uses flawed individuals to accomplish his will, not because of their perfection, but despite their imperfections. His narrative challenges us to look beyond the superficial, to understand that true strength lies not merely in physical might, but in an unwavering covenant with the divine. As the candle flickers, casting long, dancing shadows, we are left to ponder, in our own lives, where do we place our trust? Do we, like Samson, allow our personal desires and weaknesses to compromise the divine purpose within us? Or do we, in moments of humility and surrender, find the courage to call upon a greater strength, even if it means confronting our own downfall? Samson's echo reverberates through time, a poignant question whispered from the dust of a fallen temple. Can we, too, find our redemption, not in our triumphs, but in our ultimate surrender to the sacred, even when the path is paved with